The difficulty here is, of course, getting those subscribers. And you need a good flow of games to actually keep them on board. The per session pricing model is actually quite interesting. Wild Tangent has had a bit of success with this. Here you basically have your user purchase virtual currency, in this case tokens, and then they can basically segment how much of the game they want to play, whether it's per minute, per stage, or per play. So in this situation, you have every user contributing as much as they want to this revenue stream. And it's capped at the price of the actual game itself of $20. Your average revenue per download is now at $1. It lowers the bars of entry for these users, but again, you deal with store value systems and convincing buyers to buy the tokens. The free-to-play item-based games, this is a model that's basically gotten a bad rap in the Western media because they believe that the developers are trying to nickel and dime them for everything that they have. And in my opinion, the only way that this model is successful is actually if the game is free and the items are not. In this case, for example, EA tried this with Kart Racer, and they weren't successful. They were selling a racing game, and then they were also selling virtual tracks. So in this situation, this is very interesting because, especially here in Asia, you have a very small percent of users purchasing a great deal of money. It's not uncommon for them to spend $100 a month on games, but if you look at the 70%, you might, when you just originally look at it, you might say they're leeches. We don't need them. But in fact, they're the foundation of this business model. Without them, no one would be willing to pay. And I don't know if the history on this is basically, gamers used to have a beta period where it was free for everyone to play. And then at a certain point, when they reached enough users, they said, we're going to start charging. And at that point, many of the users just left. So then someone became smart and said, you know what, let's just charge them for virtual items and still keep them around. You deal with some cultural issues, especially in China, where the user can pay to basically level up their own character and just beat up on the people that have no money. And that's, it's an interesting model, and it's successful. Here at QQ Games, basically you have a great deal of single-player games that have been turned into multiplayer games and all pushed into the same area, and people are then asked to buy virtual currencies and kind of, it's a very simple model. So one of the key learnings that we have at PopCap is the number of platforms that our games are published on actually increases our revenue. We don't find any cannibalization whatsoever. So in this instance, and we can do this because our games are very low tech and they don't demand a lot from graphics and what have you. So in this case, many users could possibly enter at the in-flight entertainment. So they play our games online and then they purchase them on PC, iPhone, what have you. And we continue to expand on new platforms as often as we can. So the value of attracting a broader audience of casual games is again, we go back to the original definition of a broad audience. I put this up here because I want you to start thinking about when you're developing games, who are you developing them for, and who are you alienating? For example, so we have in the US, the PopCap users are typically female, older, and I guess if I'm asking you this question because when you're developing a game, do you really need a bloody skull? Even if it's a hardcore game, does it really add that much value to a hardcore gamer experience? And it could just alienate this large population. So I would then say also you don't want to pander to this audience either. For example, just because it's largely female-based, you don't have to have everything pink and dealing with marriage or anything like that. So having the time to polish is very important at PopCap. Here we have Fabergé egg and your typical mall painting. You know, I want you to start thinking about what are you developing and the reasons why. So for me personally, I would rather develop something small, high quality, and that will basically last the test of time, rather than a mall painting that will be on sale, next month. So with that, I'd actually like to take you through a case study of Astropop. Here you will see that PopCap did not have any design documents, no schedules, and the developers are just free to do as they wish. From a marketing standpoint, it makes things very difficult to say, well, okay, when are we launching the game? Undetermined. Okay, so how can I build a marketing campaign around that game? You can't. Up until a month before, we really don't know if the game is going to be launched. And initially, that was my major pet peeve with PopCap when I initially started. But then I really saw the game progression, and then I just shut up. Because I knew that once they have the time to really polish it and make the game even more fun, it's going to do much more than any marketing campaign can do. So, I'd like to switch over now. This is the original prototype Astropop. This took 2 days to develop. And here you basically have a single pull down with a left click button, right release. Now, I know this looks very simple, but you have to really, at this point, say, is the game fun? Does it have any fun elements to it whatsoever? And it is. And there's still a fun element to it. So then we can move on from that point. And you can actually see that this is 11/3/2003. This is 2 days later. So here, we're basically testing out a new game mechanic, and that is one click only. So you hold down the left, and you basically suck up all the blocks. You release the left button, and there's a fatal error. But again, there's still no scoring mechanism. It's very basic, but so now we're testing out new one-click functionality. So this is now 1 week after, or 4 days after that previous version. So here, basic art elements have now been added. You now have the character, the ship, and again, we're still focusing on one click. Here, we're just focusing on level progression.